I'm Jeffrey Colomb. This is Creative Studies. On this episode of Creative Studies, Stop, Drop, Dash. We talk a lot about how AI is leading the new work revolution. But one company we all know, Dropbox, is making this possible with a new type of search tool called Dash. Some companies, like Feeler Media, the producer of the podcast Visionaries, are using Dash to do global, matrix, distributed work with teams located all over the world and with files and conversations happening everywhere. So what does this future that exists in the here and now to enhance creative work look like? We speak with Morgan Brown, Vice President of Product and Growth for AI products at Dropbox, about this new revolution. Roll the intro.
Quiet please, quiet please. Creative Studies is in session. Creative Studies. Studying is different in the 21st century. Creative Studies with Jeffrey Colomb. Study Group on Creative Studies.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to another fine episode of Creative News for the Creative Class. I'm Jeffrey Colomb. We're happy you joined us. This episode, we're joined by Morgan Brown of Dropbox. I've known Morgan for some time now. I read and reviewed his pretty amazing book that he co-wrote with Sean Ellis a decade ago called Hacking Growth. And I've really stayed up on what he's been up to over the last decade. Which leads us to Dropbox. Dropbox is forging a new revolution as an operating system, even though many may not think of it as an operating system. Part file sharing, part document signing, part video review system. Its latest innovation is called Dash. What does it do? Well, let's talk to Morgan and find out. Welcome to Creative Studies.
Thanks so much for having me, Jeff. Super excited to be here. It feels like this one was a long time coming, so thrilled to be with you.
Yeah, I mean, I've followed you for some time, and just so listeners and viewers are aware, I've read your book from a decade ago that you wrote with Sean Ellis. You both actually did a review of my book, which is the top review on the back of the physical cover, if you can recall that.
I can. Disruptive marketing. I love it.
That's right. And I find, how you've navigated your career, it's been pretty interesting and I've been amazed by it. So tell me how you've kept grounded over the past decade and sort of navigated the complexity of this interesting career that you've had.
Thanks. Yeah, it has been quite the ride for sure. I think, I didn't come at marketing or product management with any kind of pedigree. I was a biology major who failed out of college, luckily got a job at a startup during the dot-com boom because I knew how to write some HTML. I was good with computers and started in the operations department and kind of just worked my way into early digital marketing, customer acquisition, because that was the need at the time for the company. I didn't have a marketing MBA. I didn't know what AIDA stood for. I didn't know the 4 Ps. And so everything has really been kind of trial and error, building theory, but also doing a lot of the practice and frankly, getting punched in the face a lot and kind of learning through the school of hard knocks. But I think what I learned, or what I think kind of one of my superpowers has become, is just I'm a very curious person. I love trying to understand how things work. I think I've always been this way. I remember when I was a kid, my brother and I were pulling apart, motorbikes and speaker systems and, just really trying to understand how things work. And I think that actually has served me really well, trying to understand how marketing and product work to kind of connect people and like build value for them. So I think it's helped me solve a lot of really hard, interesting problems at, companies like Instagram and Shopify and Facebook. But a lot of them don't necessarily look like specific marketing or product problems. They just happen to be maybe one of the important things to go solve. And I just kind of followed my curiosity to go solve them. So I think that's really kind of the desire to just remain curious. I always tell people, I'm like, look, I don't know what I'm talking about when it comes to this new technology, when it comes to AI, when it comes to any innovation. All I know is that I'm committed to trying to learn as fast as possible, to be curious about what the potential is, and then think about how might we apply that to solve like real people's problems and create value for them. And I think that has been the through line for everything. And it's what has led me to Dropbox and Dash along the way.
Let's ponder the creative class here for a second, because they make up a large part of the audience that watches this. And creatives really now are a cross section of people. You have creative directors, you have art directors, but you don't just have artists anymore. You also have, developers, or what we would dub sort of creative technologists, that sort of hybrid role. I'm curious now on your take because of vibe coding and sort of the rise of that happening. What do you see in this area in terms of what careers will thrive and, what may be altered as a result of the rise of AI?
Yeah, I think, and not to be too presumptuous, but like you and I are also both creators, we're both authors. We've built a bunch of stuff. And so I think, I always try to kind of look at it through that lens, both through the technology and what's possible, but then also from the people doing the creative work, so I'm super excited. I'm obviously working in the space. I think it's an important area to try to figure out, to kind of harness it for helping us do kind of the work we want to do, and kind of get a bunch of the stuff that gets in our way out of the way. And I think AI has a real unique opportunity. But I'm also cautious and a bit skeptical. I try to kind of approach it with a bit of like pragmatic optimism, I guess. But for example, like these foundation models, they are trained on both your and I's books. I can ask it questions about disruptive marketing, it knows about it. I can ask it about hacking growth, it knows it in depth. And it's not clear that I'll ever have any control over which models will use my stuff, or even if I could use my own stuff to train my own model. And I think that's a serious issue we need to solve. But I think what I'm most excited about is just, there's a great Rick Rubin quote in his book, The Creative Way, where he's like, the goal is to get the self out of the way so the work can emerge. And I think about Dash and AI like that, and really what that enables is kind of how do you get all of the friction, all of the roadblocks out of the way of the creative act? And then how does that turn, everyone into kind of unlock their creative being? And to your point about vibe coding, for me as a product manager in software, I think many product managers are frustrated, non-technical, wannabe engineers, or at least that's the camp I would put myself in. Like, if only I could code, I think I've said to my wife numerous times over the past couple of decades. And I've had fits and starts of trying to do it, but never really could get it to stick because it's hard. It's a tough skill to acquire. And I think tools like vibe coding kind of get that roadblock out of the way, so you can kind of really lean into, hey, I have this idea. How do I bring it into the world and validate it and kind of see if there's some there. And I think you can apply that to whether you're a professional, a creative professional who makes their living in the creative field, or you're someone who is adjacent to creativity, or someone who has had a thought about something that should exist and just have never been able to kind of like clear the roadblocks to do that. So I think, there's just so much opportunity with AI for creative folks to kind of get all of that noise out of the way and get towards more of those creative acts. Like I often say, to my creative counterparts, I'm like, for every hour I can get you out of project management tools, that will be a net positive to the world. And I just try to think of all the creative people we could get out of project management software and just back into the flow of creating. And I think, all of us will be a lot better off because of it.
Man, you're tugging at my heartstrings there when you said, get you out of product management software.
Yeah. Not that project managers are essential. I mean, they do amazing work. They keep the trains running on time. But I think we've all become kind of, to one degree or another, part of that, part of that process.
So I follow and really enjoy a lot of your public persona, especially your posts on LinkedIn. You have been talking a lot about the need for risk and using gut instinct. How does this help you navigate the world that has been overwashed so much with software, data analytics, and people who second guess themselves because of all of these systems?
Yeah, I think, I've lived in both worlds where there's not a lot of data and you have to go on kind of instinct or what you believe, your first principles, whatever you want to call them. And I've also lived in worlds where there's, unbelievable amounts of data. Working at Facebook and Instagram, the data is, the lingua franca of the entire place. But one of the things that really stood out to me when I was at Meta, Adam Mosseri, who runs Instagram, he said to me, Morgan, there will be lots of instances where you'll just never have enough data to make what you feel is the right decision. You just have to trust your gut. And I just thought that was, to hear from someone who is drives one of the most important consumer products on the planet, who, the entire company is kind of oriented around understanding the data that flows through it. It was just such a good kind of clarifying moment for me. And so basically, whether you want to call it gut instinct or whatever, I think it's effectively two things. It's kind of your pattern recognition over time. So all of the experiences that you've had kind of distilled down into kind of your base set of intuition and kind of the things you don't deeply understand, but they're all kind of built on that experience. And then your taste, like what you believe should exist in the world, what your particular standards are, what problems you think should be solved. And I think combining those two things, that point of view on what you believe should exist and what you believe can be helpful and that you want to bring into the world, along with that kind of recognition of experience, can be really helpful, especially when the data isn't there. I think, for example, with AI, things are changing so fast that yesterday is almost irrelevant at this point. Every day, every hour, it seems like there's some new piece of information, some new capability. And so waiting for the data just means that you're kind of going to be sitting on the sidelines. And so I think I try to just anchor from, okay, the principles, what do I believe? What do I believe good looks like? What have I seen work in the past? What have I not seen work in the past? How does today's problems map or match to that or don't? And so I kind of think of, gut instinct just as conviction shaped by your experience and then kind of battle tested through all of the rounds that it's been through. So I think it's helpful to kind of get over the analysis paralysis and get moving in a way that you still feel really good about.
Let's pivot to talking about your role at Dropbox. What are you responsible for leading there now? And what excites you about, what excites your creative side about some of the work that you're doing?
Yeah, so I lead product and growth for AI at Dropbox, really focused on Dash, which is our smart work assistant knowledge management tool. It makes it really easy for anyone doing the type of work that we do, creative knowledge work, generating new ideas and bringing them into the world, find, organize, share, and collaborate to kind of get all of that done. And I think really what excites me is, we were talking before the call about how long we've been Dropbox customers for. I think you said you joined in 2014 or 2015. I think similarly, I'm going on a decade plus. Dropbox has done so much to reinvent how we work. The ability to share large files across the internet was kind of a huge game changer, a huge unlock. They also really kind of developed the idea of product-led growth for how a company scales. Really heralded the era of kind of the consumerization of enterprise software. So they're really all about reinvention and about making knowledge work. Their mission statement is a more enlightened way of work. And so for me, it's simply this, is that AI is, I think we've seen a few, at least in my career, we've seen a few major transition moments. So .com obviously is a big one. Mobile is another big one. And I think this one with AI will kind of outpace both of those from where it looks right now. And just to kind of think about how we've done knowledge work since Dropbox, since the advent of SaaS products has not really changed. We've been working the same way for the last 10 years. We all use cloud applications. We all use 100 SaaS tools. We all use chat. We all use email. And really, when I saw AI kind of coming, I was like, oh, the first place this is going to really hit, the first order impact is going to be how can it change like work and fundamentally make work better. And when I was at Meta, I managed a team of like 50 product managers. And the number one feedback on all the employee surveys that we did was I spend too much of my time doing low quality work, or not low quality, but low value work, like stuff that just kind of gets in my way. Dropbox did a study, and people waste like 160 hours a year just on switching browser tabs, which seems bananas. I mean, that's like a month a year just switching between stuff, searching for stuff. So if you multiply that by millions of people like you and me doing that work, like the scale is pretty significant. And I think it's, it just gets in the way of this like deeply human creative work. The talk about maker time versus manager time. Maker time is something we're all after. Trying to hold calendar blocks to do deep thinking, try to, silence your notifications. That's all in service of trying just to get more of that time for us. And so, Dash and what Dropbox is trying to do is just kind of eliminate all that, collapse all that waste down and just give everyone kind of instant access to deeper time and access to kind of the stored memory that exists in the company so that you can do better work with your team and kind of like do the work we're all hoping to do every day. So yeah, that's why I get excited is, how do we reduce the noise, unlock more deep time for more flow, and get us out of that kind of project management rut and into the creative space more often.
Enjoying this conversation? Check out Dropbox and Dash and what they are up to at events.dropbox.com and join their 101s. I'll be on a future episode so we can continue the conversation and learning there. Dash, I find it to be, a really powerful product. We use it quite a bit, especially because I think when people think of search, they're still stuck in this world of, oh, that's a search engine, that's Google, or in a newer way of thinking it, oh, okay, I'm doing search within a large language model. They don't think of search as, well, wait a minute, I need to find conversations, I need to find content, I need to find a number of these things with how distributed teams work. So pretty exciting how you're sort of rewriting, the workflows that are out there.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing that, we rely on hundreds of tools. We create thousands of documents, tens of thousands of chat messages, and in some way, we don't really have great access into that history, into that memory. We have all these documents, but it's hard to find the right one. We have all these conversations, but they kind of burn off into the ether. And I think what Dash is trying to do is say, hey, if we can connect all of those sources together, if we can make it easy for you to access them just with a quick search or, a document shared with your team or a stack created around a project, that collective memory is unlocked. And then just kind of the possibilities are just really exciting. So rather than starting from scratch on a creative brief, it might be helpful to see the last winning ones, or if there's a standard operating process of how you go about tackling a website redesign, great, like let's start there. Let's not try to like reinvent the wheel. And so yeah, that's really what Dash is trying to do, is kind of connect everyone to kind of this collective memory and intelligence that exists at the company in a way that hasn't really been done before. And then turn that into a vehicle to kind of drive better output and better work, because you're spending less energy searching for stuff and more energy creating from the raw materials that exist when you're in your organization.
So recently, a pretty popular tech CEO was quoted saying the following: "What does empowerment look like in the era of AI? It's not just about building tools for specific roles or tasks. It's about building tools that empower everyone to create their own tools." So I'm curious, especially from your position, what you see in the changing workflow and how the ability for, to build or design may change what you offer customers next.
Yeah, that quote definitely resonates with me. Inside of Dropbox in Dash, we see a lot of people adopting this mindset of creating new tools, creating new workflows, contributing code for the first time. One of our designers on Dash, he just was lighting me up on Slack the other day because he had pushed a bunch of diffs or pull requests to our GitHub around a bunch of changes he was making to one of the Dash surfaces. And he's like, this is amazing. I did it all with Cursor. And so I had a product manager who spec'd out a whole new concept for Stacks, which is one of my favorite products. And he did it in Lovable. He sent it to me. He's like, play around with it. And that's just such a amazing kind of unlock of creativity and ways to really kind of like push thinking and conversation and creativity forward. So I'm really excited about that. And it happens in like big and small ways. So for example, I had a Dash customer I was talking to the other day, and one of the parts of their job is they're constantly responding to requests for proposals. They're a small company. They have like one person that can do that. And for them, they're like, this is the lifeblood of our business. Our ability to respond well to these proposals, to do it in a way, and win at a certain rate is really critical to just kind of keeping everyone here employed and keeping the lights on. And so they've really started to use Dash to help them improve their RFP process. So to pull from winning proposals and kind of like start with like those raw materials rather than starting from scratch each time, from defining kind of how they want those proposals to sound with a custom voice and a tone and a kind of a brand voice, if you will, in those proposals. The ability to do them, assemble rough drafts faster so they can get more into the fine tuning as opposed to just kind of the mere production. So like that's a really empowering story. And so yeah, I think like big and small, I think there's opportunities to kind of improve how we do stuff, but then there's opportunities to just reinvent it entirely and ask, if we were starting from scratch, how would we do it? And I think that's some of the most exciting stuff. Yeah, so those are some examples of where I think across the stack you're seeing this.
I love hearing that actual case study about like RFPs, because a lot of people always are like, well, how is this actually being used in the real world? And that's like a real true business case right there, because there's a lot of service companies that have to respond to RFPs, and it is laborious to, not use a better term. It's a lot. So it's really interesting to see how that's being used there.
Yeah, it's not the sexiest use case, but like it's really important part of their realities. But we've had other cool stuff. Like we've had some famous musicians starting to use Dash to help go through their archives and pull together, demo, create materials for their upcoming releases. And we partner with McLaren, a Formula One racing team. Their marketing team has been using Dash to coordinate kind of across their big live event activations at F1, deliver specialized liveries for the cars and stuff like that. So there's been really cool use cases. But I think for me, it's kind of going back to that whole idea of like helping creative people get some of the administrative stuff out of the way, like that RFP process, like that's a home run for that business. And hopefully they can use it to spend more time on the creative work product versus just the process part.
So we were talking about how Dropbox can be almost an operating system for some companies. We use it as an OS at our company, Feeler Media. What's the wildest business model you have seen that has used Dropbox as its operating system?
Yeah, there's so many. The amazing part about Dropbox and the legacy of the company is just the number and different types of people that use Dropbox and power their business. We recently had a huge EDM artist drop a mixtape through Dropbox,
Love
so
that.
that was pretty cool.
Love that.
I kind of mentioned the band kind of using Dash to kind of
Yeah.
put together their anthology. Lots of individual photographers and show producers, chefs, with their recipes and like a kind of back of house operating. I've talked to a woman who works at Warner Records in the marketing operations department and how they deal with all the celebrity and talent releases and approvals across multiple PR, social media, legal, management representatives. So yeah, it seems like in every corner, someone has a use case for Dropbox. And that's part of the energy of working here, is getting to try to solve those problems for people who are doing incredible work. And Dropbox and Dash gets to be a small part of helping them on their journey.
Love it. Love it. All right. Going to state 3 things here. You have 3 choices. You can only choose 2 of them.
Okay.
Good, fast, cheap. What's your 2 choices and why?
Yeah, that is a good question. I'll answer it, but I kind of worry that it's a bit of a trap sometimes, because I think they're poised as being in conflict, but so there was a Stripe conference a couple of months ago, and Johnny Ive was there. And I think Patrick Collison asked him roughly the same question. And he had a really interesting answer, which resonated deeply with me. He said, care and intention can exist under any constraint. And you don't necessarily need to sacrifice care and intention, regardless of kind of the constraint that you face. And so I think, if I was going to pick, I would often pick good and fast. But I actually don't know that means that it can't also be cost effective as well. In fact, in my experience, it often feels like the projects that take a really long time and go way over budget tend to be the least satisfactory of the things that I work on. It's like those outcomes, they don't really line up with kind of that. So I think constraints are important. They help you like prioritize what matters. They help you kind of focus in on the most essential elements. And I think if you can kind of stay anchored in the care and the intention, then you can set the right bar for what good looks like, what we're willing to trade off, what we're not. And I think those things don't have to go away under like a really tough time constraint or a monetary constraint. You just have to use those as inputs into how you solve for that. So yeah, that's how I would answer it. But I think it's kind of like, how do we ground on something, with like a deeper intention or a deeper principle and kind of work from there.
Morgan Brown, Vice President of Product and Growth for AI Products at Dropbox. Hey, thanks for being creative with us here on Creative Studies.
Oh man, thank you so much for having me. This was a blast, and hopefully it won't be 10 years before the next time.
I agree. Let's make sure we get together soon.
Totally.
I'm Jeffrey Cologne for Creative Studies. I'll catch you next time.
Creative Studies with Jeffrey Cologne.